Well, the Dupree family had a very strong faith system in all of their beliefs, and it came into almost everything that they did in the business. From, even our core values around the environment came from DJ's belief that you were merely a steward of the environment. Therefore, you were expected to take care of the environment. To the way that they thought about the ownership of the business, they used this term of collective capitalism. The idea that the laborers and the workers were part of creating the value, therefore they should share in the benefits. So when you think about the underpinnings of this company, to me, it all comes down to this question of service to a greater good, whether that greater good is the community, whether that's a greater good, by the way, is to the shareholders, whether that greater good is to the people who you employ. And I think when you get behind almost every one of our values, it comes to that question of what's the greater good, and if I can serve the greater good, will I increase the level of creativity so I can do greater work and, again, create more greater good? There's always been a strong belief at Herman Miller that one of the important things you have to know is that if you're not in a state of becoming, you don't have longevity, or you're going to have some finite endpoint. And so what we tried to describe in this document we wrote called Things That Matter, which is essentially our way of describing a value statement. We used the words things that matter because we said these things matter to us. And by the way, it's not a complete list because there's other things that matter to us. And we believe that will even change and evolve over time, but there's some bedrocks. The idea of seeing your past as a sail is the way we described it, rather than as an anchor, was that you can't be a prisoner to your past, but what you can do is honor the principles and the things you've learned in your past is a way to take you forward. But if you ever get to the spot that those things are stopping you, becoming constraints, like, for instance, saying, and we've had this in our past, when we first started talking about the Toyota production system or the Herman Miller production system, people said, well, we didn't do it that way in the past. Therefore, we shouldn't do it because you're making a change that is counter to the culture. And what we tried to get clear was separating values from cultural practices and said, we're not going to let the values change, but we understand that the cultural practices that demonstrate those values will change over time. Like, for instance, today, many of our people work in remote locations. They work at home. So the value of having people together as a community is still there, but how that happens now is often exhibited in an electronic format, not in necessarily a physical format. So being able to understand how the past can take us to the future is an important element. We talked earlier that our culture being based on participation and really trying to empower folks to make decisions. The only way that I can be confident of that decision-making process and empowerment is to know that there is some shared set of bedrock principles that everyone believes that we're going to stick to. For instance, one of them that we talk about a lot is transparency. And we say, and that's become more of an in vogue term today. When we wrote it, we said, if you are transparent, we don't have to worry about truthfulness. Because when you're transparent, by definition, you can't not tell the truth because people will figure out that it's there. That also plays out even in the way that we think about in a meeting. When you're in a meeting, we want you to be transparent about where you're at. We don't want you to have sort of the pocket veto that in the meeting you agree and you walk out of the meeting to say to everybody else, hey, I agreed in there, but let me tell you, I don't think we should be doing this. So we try to use those as a way to describe the behavior and the ways that we want folks to relate to one another and the way that we hope that they relate to the external environment as well.